What's up, Alabama fans? It's Andrew Bone with BamaInsider.com. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're staying safe out there, quarantining yourself and not getting sick. Hopefully, everybody's staying healthy and staying indoors. But anyway, the other day we did I did a video on the top 10 five-star offensive players of the Nick Saban era. Now, this is just my opinion. Yeah, nothing is set in stone. It's not necessarily right. It's not necessarily wrong. If you have your own opinion on who you think the top 10 players are in the Nick Saban era that were rated 5 stars, comment below. Give me your take. I'm certainly not going to disagree with you. I'm just giving you my take. Guys that I've watched throughout high school and then their college career. Not necessarily going to talk much about their pro career. Not really letting that factor in. Just basically from high school to college. In my opinion, the top 10 guys. And it was tough to decide the defensive guys. Like I said, we did the offensive guys the other day. I encourage you to go back and watch that. Today we're going to do the top 10 defensive 5 stars that were signed by Nick Saban. And I think what I'm going to do early next week, is I'm going to go back, because there were so many 4-star type guys. We're going to go over the guys who were in the Rivals 100, so the top guys who were rated in the Rivals 100. So not 5 stars and not outside the Rivals 100, just the guys inside it. And we'll talk about the offensive guys, the defensive guys, and then we'll move on to just 4-star guys. So the guys who were ranked, basically number 101 to number 300 in the country. So today, like I said, we're going to talk about my personal top 10 defensive guys that were rated 5 stars coming out of high school in the Nick Saban era. It was tough. I mean, it was, as many of you know, Alabama has recruited just so many 5 stars throughout the last 13 years, and I covered Alabama during the Mike Shula era, and there weren't even a lot of 5 stars visiting back then. You were lucky to get a 5-star commitment, but there's just so many guys that Alabama's had tremendous amount of success in terms of landing and developing and sending on to the next level. So let's talk about those guys. Some guys that were on the outside. Trust me, I hated putting these guys on the outside because I felt like they could have easily been in the top 10, but you had to cut it off somewhere. And 2 of my favorite guys throughout the whole recruiting process: KIRKPATRICK from Gadsden City High School, and Mac Wilson from Carver High School in Montgomery. Those are 2 big time guys, both in the NFL now. I thought they could have easily been in the top 10. Both had tremendous high school careers, lived up to all the hype, and certainly had great college careers. Both took it all the way to signing day, which is kind of shocking because both were in-state kids. Alabama, having great recruiting classes, before them, and the top program in the country. So it's kind of surprising that those 2 in-state players, and I guess because they were getting so much attention, and everybody in the country wanted them. I think they wanted to kind of enjoy the process and take their visits and have some fun. But in the end, everybody expected both of those guys to go to Alabama, and they did. A couple guys that we're going to be watching this year, just see how they, do they take that next step. Dylan Moses, Patrick Surtain Jr., definitely 2 guys that I feel like could potentially get to the top 10 defensive players in the Nick Saban era. Moses, I certainly thought, was on his way prior to getting injured before last season, and as long as he comes back 100%, has a great season, we could easily be talking about him as one of the top 10 defensive players in the Nick Saban era. So let's get into the top 10. Now, once again, just my list, my opinion, probably wrong on some of them, but don't really care. Anybody's welcome to throw out their top 10 guys. I'm looking forward to seeing some comments in our video once we get it posted. My number 10 guy was CLINTON-DIX in that 2011 recruiting class. HaHa made an early commitment. I think he committed around or after the 8A Alabama's 8A game. I remember being at a wedding that day actually, and getting a phone call from him saying that he had just committed to Alabama. So obviously, he committed early. Really didn't waver throughout the whole process. I mean, he was one of the top overall players in the country. He was a 5-star recruit. Had a lot of offers, but knew what he wanted to do. Kind of, really early on in the process. I mean, he got I think it really was an Alabama-Florida State battle early on, and then he committed to Alabama and really didn't do anything else. Now, Alabama was able to get his teammate D Hart, a running back, ended up transferring, but D was originally committed to Michigan, and Alabama was able to get him on board. They were best friends. I'm sure they still are. Haven't really heard much about D in the last few years, what he's doing, but obviously, just signed a new contract with the Dallas Cowboys and having a really good pro career. And I obviously had a great college career as well. It was a lot of fun watching him. I thought he lived up to all the hype, and had a tremendous 3 seasons in Tuscaloosa. Number 9, Marlon Humphrey, in-state kid from Hoover High School. Obviously, many know him as Bobby Humphrey's son, but guess what? He was wanting to create his own legacy, and I felt like he did. It's having a great pro career. Was first team All-Pro this year, selected to the first Pro Bowl. I think the biggest thing with him coming in, I guess when he was going into his decision was, he didn't want to be labeled as Bobby Humphrey's son. He wanted to be Marlon Humphrey, and he certainly lived up to the hype in high school. Was a big-time player, 5-star recruit. Had a great college career. The biggest thing with him the biggest school that was involved outside of Alabama was Florida State. Now, he took some other visits, but it was really an Alabama-Florida State battle, as many people remember. What a lot of people don't remember is he was actually strongly leaning towards Florida State. Loved their track program, loved their coaching staff, and it was also going to be one of those situations where it may get him out of the Bobby Humphrey spotlight. He ends up deciding to stay home. Alabama was the best place for him. Had a great career, first-round draft pick, and obviously, having an amazing pro career. Sometimes when you get to college, it takes you a couple years to really develop and start to shine. And I think with Marlon, we're continuing to see him become an elite player at the pro level. I mean, it just seems like every single year he gets better and better and better. And obviously, he is one of the top cornerback prospects, one of the top cornerbacks in the entire NFL. And that's certainly a testament to his development, his work ethic, and everything that he's put into to make his own name. All right, number 8 on my list is one of my favorite players, one of my favorite guys that I ever interviewed, and it was always just so tremendous in terms of if you ever needed to talk to him, he was always available. He's always made himself available, even a couple days before signing day, and that's RASHAAN Evans out of Auburn High School. So RASHAAN Evans, my number 8 overall, 5-star in the Nick Saban era on the defensive side of the ball. You have RASHAAN Evans at number 8. I mean, who's ahead of him? RASHAAN's recruitment obviously was pretty crazy. Everyone assuming he was going to go to Auburn. Auburn High School, Auburn legacy. So much pressure on him to go to Auburn, and with his choice to go to Alabama, I think that certainly shocked a lot of people, especially after Auburn's official athletic site released that RASHAAN Evans had signed with Auburn about 5 minutes before he announced his decision. So, that was a big moment for him. That was a big moment for Alabama. I know his family, certainly took a lot of heat for that, and I think that they got through all that, but it certainly wasn't good for the first few weeks. Once he announced that decision for Alabama instead of Auburn. But yeah, I mean, he had a great college career, as we all know. Got drafted in the first round. Led the Tennessee Titans in tackles this year, and certainly having a tremendous pro career. All right, number 7 on my list is HASEAN Robinson. One of the most dominant defensive tackles at Alabama during the Saban run. Obviously, when he arrived on campus, looked like a 35-year-old man. I'll never forget my buddy Mike Johnson, who many of you know, played at Alabama, was an All-American offensive lineman at Alabama. Mike told me, I saw him probably a couple days after fall camp started, and Mike came up to me and asked me, he's like, have you seen this HASEAN Robinson kid? And I said, well, I've seen some pictures of him. He said, that guy looks older than half the players on my team. And Mike was playing with the Atlanta Falcons at the time, so you knew that HASEAN was he at least had the look. You weren't sure if he was going to end up being the type of player that he became, and obviously he certainly lived up to all the hype of being rated a 5-star. What I remember about his recruitment was Alabama played Michigan in 2012 in Jerry World to open up the season, and HASEAN ended up coming. He was from Arlington Heights High School. Ended up coming over there as a Texas commitment. I think a lot of us, a lot of reporters, probably fans that were following it back then, saw it as, all right, this is just a local kid coming to a good football game in his hometown. Then he ended up coming to Tuscaloosa for a football game. Then he ended up coming for an official visit, and then you started to really hear that Alabama had a good chance to flip him, and they were able to do that. I think word got out that he was going to flip, and I think some Texas reporters ended up putting out there that he had decommitted from Texas. He didn't really like that because he had not actually said anything yet. Stuff like that happens, but he ends up announcing on signing day to Alabama, even though even though it kind of came out the day before that he was going to be flipping. But obviously was a great player at Alabama. I think he just signed a new deal with the Los Angeles Rams. So obviously he had a great high school, college, and pro career. All right, my number 6 guy. Now, I think a lot of people are probably forgetting about this guy, and they shouldn't. I think just because of his, I guess there wasn't really an exciting pro career. But D. Milliner, I thought D. Milliner was one of the most lockdown, shutdown defensive backs in the Nick Saban era. 5-star recruit out of Stanhope Elmore High School. Was certainly a big time player in high school. And then in college, I think that injuries kind of derailed his pro career. If he would have stayed healthy, I think he would have been certainly a big time player. I think he was number 9 overall draft pick by the New York Jets. It's just unfortunate that his pro career wasn't as good as his college career, but high school, college, I thought he was one of the best in the Nick Saban era. Didn't really have a crazy recruiting story. I mean, everybody just assumed he was going to Alabama the entire time. Had Alabama, Auburn, I think Florida State, kind of as his top 3 schools, but in the end, picked Alabama, and he committed kind of. I think it was around August, maybe before the start of his senior season, and it was a pretty solid commitment. All right, we're getting down to the nitty gritty. The top 5, my top 5. 5-star recruits who played at Alabama during the Nick Saban era. So basically, they were 5-stars. They had good careers at Alabama, and it's just my opinion. You can have your opinion. You can throw in the comment section below who you think are the top 10 defensive 5-stars in the Saban era. And like I said, and I said this the other day when I did this offensive story is, we're just going by the Rivals.com rankings. What Rivals.com ranked these guys at in high school. So I kept getting comments, oh, you missed, Derrick Henry, you missed Amari Cooper. Well, those guys were rated 4-stars. They probably shouldn't have been rated 4-stars, but they were rated 4-stars. They were in the Rivals 100. They were top 100 players, but they just weren't 5-star recruits. So we're just going based off of what their star rating was in high school. Doesn't matter if it was wrong or not. This is just what we're talking about. So, where you're talking about what they were ranked in high school in my opinion, of what they ended up developing into in college. So that's all it is, and I hope you guys are enjoying it, and I hope you will put in who you think are the top 10 guys, because there's no right or wrong answers here. My answers aren't right. My answers aren't wrong. Neither are yours. These are just an opinion piece, and just something fun to do for right now. All right, my top 5. And number 5, Landon Collins. Landon was a 5-star recruit out of Louisiana, as many people know. People will certainly remember when his mom was shaking her head at the Under Armour All-America game when he announced for Alabama instead of LSU. I think all of us at the time assumed that he was probably not going to end up at Alabama when his mom was shaking her head, that it was just kind of a temporary thing, that he would eventually end up at LSU. But and I think he ended up visiting LSU the final weekend before signing day. But in the end, stuck with Alabama, and I think it ended up working out pretty well for him. Obviously, a All-American career at Alabama. Definitely a big-time player at the NFL level. Has been a All-Pro. Definitely had a tremendous career with the Giants, and now with the Redskins. Number 4, another defensive lineman, Daron Payne. Definitely one of the most impressive players that I saw coming out of high school. He had gotten a little bit overweight, maybe heading into his senior season. There was a lot of people kind of worried about him, but I was never really concerned too much, just because of his strength, his quickness at that size. I kept thinking, if he can get into Alabama's weight program and trim up and get in good shape, this kid is going to be an absolute terror on the defensive line. And he certainly lived up to to all the accolades and all the 5-star rankings and all that stuff. I mean, he was just a very, very tough player to block, and had a great college career at Alabama. His recruitment wasn't too crazy. I mean, I think he picked Alabama over Auburn. There was a lot of other schools that were involved, but really an Alabama-Auburn battle for him. Auburn was kind of in the lead early on, and then Alabama moved ahead and ended up getting an early commitment from him. But I think the biggest thing with him, with Daron, and I'll mention this about another NFL All-Pro in a minute. Payne is, he used to tell me, one of the biggest reasons he stuck and signed with Alabama was because, and I'm not singling out other schools, I'm a single school, but he would tell me other schools would always tell him that he would never start at Alabama he wouldn't start as a true freshman. He probably wouldn't even play until his junior year, because there was so much talent that was at Alabama ahead of him that he just would never play. Well, he took that as motivation, so that worked. If you're a college coach, you're thinking, "Hey, let me go bash another school. Let me go tell them why they're not going to start." That's actually that doesn't help your case, because that's telling the kid, "Hey, you're not good enough to play there." And they use that as motivation. They use that as fuel to the fire. It's certainly something that makes them want to prove you wrong. And that's something that Daron Payne wanted to do. He wanted to prove to everybody who told him that he wasn't going to play as a true freshman, that he wasn't going to start until his junior year, that he would start, that he would play, that he would contribute. And he was a major contributor as a freshman, started as a sophomore and a junior, and obviously had an All-American career, first-round draft pick, and now with the Washington Redskins, along with pretty much half the players who've ever been drafted from Alabama. But let's move on to number 3. Now we're getting to the real ones here, top 3, which is, this was tough, guys. This was extremely tough, and I don't know how you do this. Jonathan Allen. Jonathan Allen ended up being my number 3 guy. 5-star recruit out of Virginia. I think it was an Alabama-Florida battle, back in 2013. A lot of people weren't sure exactly which position he was going to play. He wasn't really that big in terms of what he is now. He was about 200 and think 235, 240 pounds. Now he had gotten up a little bit, kind of like what we saw with Quentin Williams coming out of high school. Both those guys ended up, playing their senior year around 200, 55 pounds, 260, and then once they got to college, they were able to, carry another 40, 50 pounds. That's kind of what Jonathan was able to do, but obviously, just look up highlights of Jonathan Allen. I mean, that Superman leap that he had against Texas A&M. Definitely one of the best leaders in Alabama history. At least during the Nick Saban years. Won just about every award, and certainly a tremendous player. Number 2, in my opinion, is Reuben Foster. Now, Reuben, I mean, what an unbelievable college career he had, just as a just a chase down linebacker. You watch a kid get hit so hard every single time Reuben put his helmet on him. I mean, all the times we saw him on kickoff coverage, especially when as many remember, nobody will forget the time he lit up Leonard Fournette down in Baton Rouge on that kickoff return. Several whatever year that was, I can't remember, but people won't forget that hit. And he had so many just hits like that. His junior season. Certainly a unbelievable junior season, Butkus Award winner. I remember I asked more than a few former Alabama players who the best player they played with, during their run, and these are all Saban era guys. I had 3 different guys, and I only talked to like 5. I had 3 different guys tell me Reuben Foster was the best player that they ever played with. They thought he was unbelievable. Obviously, he's was a first-round draft pick, but I think the biggest thing with him was that it's kind of derailed his pro career. And, just some off the field issues plus injury that he suffered last year. Hopefully he comes back, but I had one player tell me, he said, everyone wants to talk about former, or I guess now you can say former NFL player Luke Kuechly and also Bobby Wagner. 2 guys who've been kind of considered the top 2 inside linebackers in the NFL the last several years. I had another linebacker tell me recently. He said Reuben's better than those guys. If he could have stayed healthy, stayed clean off the field, he would have, in the NFL, he would be better than those guys. So I'm going with Reuben Foster just based on his highlight film that I saw in high school, which was one of the best highlight films you'll ever see, and then his development. His junior season is one of the best seasons that we've seen as a linebacker. I mean, sideline to sideline guy. Once he lost that weight, he got down to about 230 pounds. Had an unbelievable junior season. I thought he was. I thought he lived up to the hype of being that 5-star number 1 linebacker in the country type player. Then finally, my number 1 guy, MINKAH FITZPATRICK. Was a 5-star recruit out of New Jersey, recruited by Mario Cristobal in 2013. Came to Alabama, had an unbelievable career. Started as a true freshman, was a significant impact player as a sophomore, as a junior. First round draft pick by the Dolphins, now with the Steelers, and All Pro. Certainly a guy who has lived up to everything that everybody expected out of him, and he was the other guy that I wanted to mention along with Deron Payne. Schools that were recruiting him, basically telling him, you're not going to end up, playing as a true freshman. You're going to end up playing, as a junior. That's when your career is going to really begin. And he didn't want to listen to that. He ends up, signing with Alabama, saying, "All right, I can contribute as a true freshman." Did that, and there wasn't really a lot of schools that were, there were a lot of schools that were offered him, but not a lot of schools that were really in it. I'd say the one school that was really, in it until the end was Florida State. They kept trying to flip him, and he liked Florida State. But in the end, stuck with Alabama. Back to Reuben Foster. We didn't even mention. Started thinking about who MINKAH a little bit, but Reuben, obviously his recruitment was as crazy as anything. Reuben Foster was originally from Leeds, Alabama, ends up transferring to over to what is it? I can't even think of it. It was not Colquitt County, but Troop High School in Georgia. Sorry, Troop High School. He ends up having a good career at Troop, and then ends up transferring. Commits to Alabama while he's at Troop, and ends up. He grew up an Alabama fan, commits to Alabama. Well, he ends up transferring to Auburn High School, as many people know, during the spring, right before his senior season. Ends up flipping to Auburn. Got the Auburn tattoo on his forearm. Everybody knows about that. Well, once the Auburn coaching staff ended up getting fired at the end of the season, he ends up decommitting, reopening his recruitment, and eventually going to Alabama. He was on an official visit to Alabama, or excuse me, he had taken an official visit to Alabama a weekend before, and then he went to Auburn. I think it was the final weekend before signing day for an official. Ends up leaving the Auburn official visit on Saturday and heading up to Tuscaloosa and hanging out with a bunch of players who were there. So that certainly didn't go over well. Everyone kind of thought that that was pretty much it, that he was going to Alabama, and he did. And obviously he had the career that he did. But all right, so we went over my top 10 guys in the Nick Saban era. Who are your top 10 guys? I want to know. Once again, number 10 was CLINTON-DIX. Number 9, Marlon Humphrey. Number 8, RASHAAN Evans. Number 7, Ashawn Robinson. Number 6, D. Milliner. Number 5, Landon Collins. Number 4, Deron Payne. Number 3, Jonathan Allen. Number 2, Reuben Foster. Number 1, MINKAH FITZPATRICK. Those were my top 10 guys. Also, threw out, Mack Wilson, KIRKPATRICK, guys that I really thought, could have easily been in that top 10 just on the outside. But obviously, a lot of talented players that have come through the Alabama program through the years. Tell me who you like, and we will get back next week, talk about the top guys who were in the Rivals 100 on the offensive side and the defense side, and then we'll move on to the other 4 stars, and then we'll break down the top 3 stars in the Saban era. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you next time.